Sipurei masios, the fifth story, the Prince of Gems. Once there was a king who did not have any children. He did not want his kingdom to be inherited by strangers, so he went to physicians, but they could not help him. Then he made a decree that the Jews should pray that he should have children. The Jews sought out a tzaddik, whose prayers would be effective in granting the king children. They searched and found a hidden tzaddik, and told him to pray that the king should have children. The tzaddik answered that he did not know anything. The Jews told this to the king. The king issued a royal edict and had the tzaddik brought to him. The king began to speak to him in a pleasant manner. Don't you realize that the Jews are in my hands? I can do anything I want to them, but I am asking you in a nice way to pray for me, that I have children. The tzaddik promised that he would have a child. He then left and returned home. The queen gave birth to a daughter. The queen's daughter was very beautiful. When she was 4 years old, she knew all types of wisdom. She could play musical instruments, and she knew all languages. From all lands, kings came to see her. The king was very happy. Afterwards, the king still yearned very much for his son, so that his kingdom would not be passed on to a stranger. Again he decreed that the Jews should pray that he have a son. They searched for the tzaddik who had prayed for the king the first time, but they could not find him, since he was already dead. The Jews continued searching until they found another hidden tzaddik. They told him that he must provide the king with a son. The tzaddik replied that he did not know anything. When the Jews told this to the king, he did as before. He similarly told the tzaddik, "The Jews are in my hands." The sage, as the tzaddik was called, asked the king, "Will you be able to do what I order?" "Yes," replied the king. The sage said, "You must bring me every type of precious gem. Every precious stone has its own specific property." Sugula. Kings have a book in which all precious stones are listed. The king said, "I am willing to give half my kingdom in order to have a son." He brought forth all types of precious stones. The sage took these gems and ground them into a powder. He then placed the powder in a cup of wine. He gave half the cup to the king to drink and half to the queen. He told them that they would have a son who consisted entirely of precious stones, and he would thus have the powers of every gem. With that, the sage returned home. The queen gave birth to a son, and the king was very joyous. However, when the son was born, he was not made of precious stones. Nevertheless, by the time he was 4 years old, he was very beautiful and well versed in all types of wisdom. He knew all the languages, and kings came to see him. The queen's daughter realized that her status had diminished, and she was jealous. Her only consolation was that the tzaddik had said that the boy would be made completely of precious stones, and this had not been fulfilled. She was glad that her brother was not made of precious stones. Then one day the king's son was carving wood and injured his finger. When the queen's daughter ran to bandage the finger, she noticed a precious stone there. She was very jealous, and she made believe that she was sick. Many physicians came, but they were not able to cure her. Then sorcerers were summoned. Finally, she told one sorcerer the truth, that she was merely acting as if she was sick. She asked this sorcerer if he could cast a spell on a person to make him into a leper. "Yes," he replied. "But what if he finds another sorcerer who can cancel the spell?" she asked. "Then he will be healed." The sorcerer said, if the charm is thrown into water, it cannot be annulled. She did this, casting a spell on her brother. Then she threw the charm into the water. The king's son became very leprous. The leprosy broke out on his nose and on his face and the rest of his body. The king had physicians and sorcerers try to cure the boy, but to no avail. Finally, he decreed that the Jews should pray. The Jews searched for the tzaddik who had given the king this son and brought him to the king. This tzaddik had been constantly praying to God since he had told the king that the prince would consist completely of precious stones, and this prediction had not been fulfilled. He argued before God, "Did I do this to enhance my own prestige? I only did this for your glory, but now what I predicted did not come true." The tzaddik came to the king and prayed for the boy, but to no avail. He was then told that a spell had been cast on the boy. This tzaddik had powers that were much higher than all types of sorcery. He informed the king that a spell had been cast, and that the charm had been thrown into water. The king's son could not be cured unless the sorcerer would cast the spell unless the sorcerer who had cast the spell was also thrown into the water. The king said, I will give you all the sorcerers to throw into the water so as to heal my son. The queen's daughter was very frightened. She knew where she had placed the charm, and she ran to the water to take it out. While she was trying to fish it out, she fell into the water. The fact that the queen's daughter had fallen into the water caused a great panic. The tzaddik then came and told the people that the king's son would be healed. The king's son recovered, and the leprosy dried up and fell away. All his skin peeled off, and it was revealed that he consisted entirely of precious stones. Just as the tzaddik had predicted, the king's son had the power of every precious stone.